also when it's winter to winter, that we are in the seasons. So if it's winter, that means you quiet the soul, look inward, do a little reflection. Spring comes, we rebound, we glow for a minute, and summer comes and we wilt. And then we grow again in the fall and shed, and then we're back into winter. And I really do think the language of the seasons is also the language for human beings to live on this earth.
Welcome to Midlife Dialogues, where we're continuing our conversation with Gina Foringer. Last time, we talked to Gina about the historic train station that she purchased and is restoring. And what a great story, by the way. That was really fun to learn about that. Today, we're going to talk more about doing something really interesting like that in midlife. So, Gina, that is not a run-of-the-mill type of thing to do. And that's the first thing I want to ask you about. Tell me about your background. Did you grow up in a kind of family that just did these big, huge projects, or where did that come from?
Well, my dad was always achieving. He went up the ranks as colonel in the Air Force. When he retired, he became a real estate agent. My mom did the same at a time when women didn't, especially a military wife. So while she was expected to be the officer's wife, she went and got a job. She worked for American Greetings Card Corporation, and she went from sorting cards that you see in the grocery store or at a drugstore to being a top sales manager, 1 year recognized across the country. So both of my parents were very successful, achievement oriented. And if I recall, they're the first that went through college in their families. And so I came from a family where we believe you could do anything you put your mind to. I am rather impulsive, but this involved intuition as well as that impulse. So the impulse occurred when I saw the station and just wanted to buy it. The intuition was more of a waiting period to see, does this belong in my life? Is this meant to be? And that's the part that at mid-age I've honed and have a deeper understanding of patience. Adrienne Rich has my favorite quote, "A wild patience has taken me this far." It's the title of one of her poetry books. And I can really identify with that wildness and that essential patience in things such as this being able to happen in my life.
I haven't come across that before, but what a concept. Wild patience. I love that.
I think when anything unfolds the way that time moves us from one thing to another, that we can't push or pull that, or it won't happen. So the patience is allowing the space, the concept, the energy of whatever is meant to be to occur. And some of that is active participation, and some of that is the waiting so that things line up or don't. This could have just as easily gone to a family who loved it and cherished that waiting room the way it was and would build their life around it. It could have gone that way, and I waited to see if that would happen. And I waited through 2, maybe 3 signed contracts with other people and that realtor before those fell away and it came to me.
Yeah. Now, just in case someone hasn't watched the first episode of this yet, you're talking about this historic train station that you purchased and are restoring. And it's just such a fascinating story. I love what you're saying now, that it kind of had to happen the way that was right for it to happen.
There's a wild patience in doing that too, of taking these things on and knowing that I'm getting out of the way so that they can be what they can be best. I don't think about danger. I don't think of something as being high risk. I don't really think about what I could lose if I do something. It might come from my parents believing I can do whatever I want. It might come from being trained to go towards gunfire in the military, apprehend the sniper, do the thing that needs to be done, so that even today, there's part of me that's always running towards what other people run away from.
Oh, that's very interesting. That seems like both a positive and a negative to me. I can see the value of it, though. Would the child that you used to be surprised to see you now and what you're doing, or not?
That's a fun question. I don't think she'd be surprised. I was always out there. I was always looking for adventure, looking for the next thing, very enthusiastic as a kid. I've always had a of energy. Too much for sitting at school, but I did all right.
Sounds like you really came from a go-getting family and you really carried that on.
Yeah, some people say that my mom is like a hummingbird because she's so busy too. So I can identify with that.
How do you feel about being 55 years old?
How do I feel about I just realized I'm 55 today. Every time I realize how old I am, it's a surprise to me. It's like new information. I'm like, wait, what? Because I really don't think about how old I am. I remember believing I would not live past 30. And so I'm always surprised that I have, and grateful, very grateful that I get to see what I get to see today in my family and friends and community.
Why do you think you never thought you'd be older than 30?
I don't know why I thought that. I mean, there was a minute where my lifestyle would have brought that into question, just experimentation with things. Yeah, mostly my lifestyle. And I think lack of a plan. If you don't plan for a future, you may not believe you have one. And I've never been one to think I'm going to get married and have kids. I never was in my radar. It never was in my radar that I was going to be a successful military officer. And it was never in my radar that I would be a business owner. These weren't things that I aspired to. These aren't things that I thought earlier would be in my life. So if you don't really think that something's going to happen, then maybe you do believe you'll die young. Maybe that's where it came from.
How old do you feel?
I feel like I'm 35, in my 30s. And it's so often that I'm relating to somebody and they're either 80 or 30. It doesn't matter. I feel like I'm their age. And then they'll say something that surprises me and reminds me that I'm not. And then there's this invisibility that happens where I don't feel like I matter as much in the world, that we trade in looks we give each other with strangers. And sometimes I feel like I can go through and not exchange any looks because I don't draw attention in the way I may have before when I was cool or thought I was cool, when I walked differently. Now I feel I move through the world and don't turn heads unless they know me. And it's just different.
Does that bother you?
I'd love to say no, particularly in the lesbian community. You see another lesbian and you do this little head nod of like, I see you. I miss that. So in that way, it bothers me. In another way, it's a relief not to be seen. And it's a relief not to think about being seen. The self-consciousness has fallen away.
How do you feel about yourself having achieved these interesting things you've done in your life? You've really achieved some things.
Surprised when I hear statements like that, because I don't think of it that way. I feel like I'm just one among other people and lucky and privileged. I'm safely living in Baltimore City and I have enough money to do some of what we've been talking about. That's privilege. I feel like I need to pay it forward, let it flow, share the resources. So it doesn't feel like achievement if it's stewardship in some way of my life and the lives with whom I'm in touch with.
What advice would you give to other people who wanted to embrace their lives more? Do you have advice?
There's a quote that I've been holding on to. It says, believe more deeply, lift your face to the light, even if for the moment you cannot see. It's Bill W. What I like about that is there's a faith that when we walk through or towards something that we're meant to, for me, and that when I feel like I can't, I literally lift my face. Even if it's dark out, there's always light. There's a candle. There's something I can lift my eyes towards and not expect to see all the time, but just move forward. Even if it's just lifting my head some days, or it's actually taking steps and walking in the light on other days, or, bundling up and walking through a storm. Movement is essential for us as human beings on this earth. That's our primitive way of being. To do that, whether it's mental or physical, that we move forward as a community, as a country, and as individuals, moving forward and being as considerate as possible about not getting in anyone else's way and trying to do the next right thing. I try to keep it that simple. There's a quote my sister-in-law did in calligraphy for us in college. Truly the light is sweet, and what a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. And that's Ecclesiastes, which I'm always surprised by. But I love that because truly life is sweet. We're in this one sweet little life that we get to have, and it is a gift. It's precious. I think it was John Keats, who I love, who said, poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion recollected in tranquility. And I can identify with that spontaneous, powerful overflow of emotion. And I can identify with recollecting in tranquility as well. That poetic aspiration to live, or how to live, with the measure of both in as many days as I can.
Oh, this is wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Gina. I have really enjoyed talking to you. And I want to thank everybody for listening to Midlife Dialogues. Check back in 2 weeks for a new episode where we'll talk to someone else doing something really interesting in their midlife. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for having me.